So I always tell people, like, don't worry about your cholesterol level. The more important number is the ratio between the HDL and the LDL,
Right. Yes. And
right?
of course,
And
there's
so,
also those small, dense LDL particles that are bad. They've already delivered their goods and they're glycated, they're damaged
right,
LDL particles. Those are the really dangerous ones, the small, dense. And then it's in the HDL. If you have high HDL, you don't have to worry about your LDL at all.
because it's cleaning it up.
Yeah,
Right. So as
it's
long as the
providing it
rate,
with the the HDL is agile and it can go into the skin and get the cholesterol sulfate and deliver it. So the LDL particles will be healthy because they're getting that cholesterol sulfate from the HDL particles. To me, I can't imagine honestly why anybody would take a statin drug, and I know I come out very strong in my opinion, but that's how I feel.
you raise a really, really good point, something that I try to bring to people's attention. Like a lot of times people are taking enzymes, amino acids, things
Mm-hmm.
like that, and they minerals, and they think it's natural. I'm like, no, no, these are, if they're isolated, you don't know what might be in it, i.e.
No, you think it's
deuterium,
pure. You think it's pure, and it never
right?
is.
Yes. I
I
have some hysterical conversations with AI, and I just tell, why are you lying to me?
Yeah.
And it'll come back and say, oh, you're right. I should have dug
I had
deeper.
so much fun with the chat GPT when it was talking about proline and how, and reactions for proline and how it takes off the carbonate. This enzyme takes off the carbonate of proline. Proline doesn't have a carbonate, so I
That's hysterical.
said, you're wrong. And then it said, oh yeah, of course, proline doesn't have a carbonate.
Oh my
It was just
God.
like,
Hey, everybody. I have the great pleasure again of speaking with Dr. Stephanie Seneff from MIT. And today we're going to dive into statin drugs and cholesterol. And welcome, Stephanie. It's so nice to be able to speak to you again. Thank you for your time.
it's great. I always enjoy talking to you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. And we actually did touch upon the cholesterol and statin drugs a little bit in our last video. So we gave that teaser. And then you sent me a nice video to one of your colleagues, Dr. Paul Mason. And I took a look at that. And so I would even recommend that as a good primer for this video that we're about to dive into with you.
Hopefully you can put a link up there, huh? For
Yes,
that.
I will definitely do that. I will have the link down below in the description and maybe even in the comments too, to make it really easy for people. Because there's so many basic things. Like he touches upon the corruption and the history of the statin drugs. Just the general facts about cholesterol and health. My personal favorite, and I don't remember if he mentioned this, but cholesterol and longevity.
Yeah.
So I love the impact on that. But let me set you loose on this. I mean, you're the real expert. Yeah, and you go back quite a ways, right? With
Yes,
diving into this.
they really started in 2007 or so when my husband was diagnosed with heart disease and the doctor put him on a high dose of statin drugs,
Wow, so it's very
four
personal for
times the
you.
normal dose. And he said he needed to take that for his whole life. And I was just like, I was like, okay, I need to know what these statins are, what they do. I don't trust this. I started out immediately suspicious. And of course, he suffered a lot of different side effects. And also, he couldn't open jars and his shoulders were hurting. And I said, that's a statin drug, and he kind of laughed. He said, no, you're just, a little crazy there, but I kept pushing on him. And, and I got all this material and I joined this group, a really awesome group called Thinks, the International Network of Cholesterol Skeptics. Yeah, the International Network of Cholesterol Skeptics Thinks. And they're still going strong today. Uffe Ravenskopf is the leader. He's a cool guy. He's a professional doctor who's published papers and really hates cholesterol. And we still correspond and people are asking for papers, and things like that. It's really wonderful. And those people were great. And I got to meet a lot of interesting people, including Dwayne Graveline, who's he calls himself Space Doc. He died, unfortunately, of an ALS-like condition that he thinks statins caused.
Oh, wow.
So he had reason to be personally upset about statin drugs. And he wrote several books. The most famous one was Lipitor, Thief of Memory, because he had experienced a blackout experience because he blamed the Lipitor on that. And in fact, he stopped taking the Lipitor. The problem went away. The doctor said, it's surely not the Lipitor that's causing your problem. You should go back on it. He went back on it. The problem came back. So it's like, anecdotal, but very clear evidence that it was causing this temporary loss of, you basically wake up and don't know where you are or where you were you forget. It's an amnesia, a short-term amnesia, really scary. But he eventually got, an ALS-like condition. It was really sad to watch him go through all of that. He had a page where he had tremendous amounts of information about statins. He was a real scholar. And I learned a lot about statins through him. So he was a member of that group. It really an exciting time for me when we were very active and constantly corresponding. We've kind of, we've all gotten older now, so but we still do correspond. It's amazing. That group is still alive, as a group.
That's fantastic. It's incredible because I'm completely ignorant. I've never heard of this group. So even during my research, and this is one of the problems, so many great resources are suppressed. They're shadow banned. So even when we go to research things, we don't come across them. And so I'm always amazed when I learn about sometimes an enormous, well-established resource of information. I'm like, how did I not come across that before?
Yeah, it's probably, because things was so much a part of my life that I kind of thought it must be quite common. Like a lot of people knew about it, but I don't think that's true. We were kind of a scholarly group. And then we wrote papers together too. We collaborated and published papers together. So it was just a really great experience for me. I've met so many interesting people through this whole process of my interest in all these diseases and all these problems. It's really been great. I've mentioned Don Huber before. He's the Mr. Glyphosate, because he's the one who introduced me to glyphosate. He's still active. He's over 90 years old, still publishing papers. It's just great to see these people.
It's wonderful.
And then there's, of course, Laszlo Boros, and he's the one who got me into deuterium. And that was also, and we're collaborating now. So it's just, I don't know. When I reflect on these last 20 years now, close to 20 years, it's just been a wonderful experience.
It's incredible, and you're showing no signs of slowing down. Like I
know I'm kind of driven. It's like I know time is running out. I'm not young anymore.
I don't know. You start to wonder. Like you're talking, people in their 90s still publishing papers and being active, and so you think about that. Like the work that you and these other great scientists are doing are actually, it's going to be lifting the ceiling on the age limit, and at some point we'll responsibly leverage technology to extend our
I hope
life.
so. Technology can do some good things, I believe.
Right.
And but we just need to know how to use it right. Especially, I am hoping in agriculture. I really kind of think all the smarts that these computers have, and have these smart tractors that can see, and they can use solar energy, and they can navigate. They can recognize weeds. And so know what to kill, and then they can have a pot of boiling water waiting to kill them. I think it would be really great if we could come up with a way to get rid of the weeds without having to have manual labor, because that's just, these days it would cost so much to have all these people pulling weeds by hand, which is what we used to do.
Right. Even better is harvesting the weeds, because the weeds are often the most nutritious part of what's going on.
Dandelions are actually really healthy, and they can help you with glyphosate. It's so ironic, but of course they're loaded with glyphosate because they're sprayed all the time. So it's kind of, it's interesting.
We're drowning in irony.
Yeah, I know. That's so true. And, liver is an extremely healthy food source, except, of course, it's loaded with glyphosate. So it's poison, A lot of the things that are good for you, even the fish, they've got the mercury. Right. It's really sad, because these super good foods have issues having to do with modern lifestyle. We've introduced poisons into super good foods, which is really frustrating, because then it's really hard to eat responsibly, It's so difficult. Well,
that's why, I focus so much on the detox aspect. And even a lot of our ancestors, they would consume clay with food to protect them from someone intentionally trying to poison them,
Yeah. And of course, sand is something we probably, because I think we sort of evolved on the seashore, probably ate a lot of sand just because it was there, like in the shellfish that we ate, the clams. And sand is silica, and silica actually helps protect from aluminum toxicity.
Right.
Chris Exley showed that. He really likes silica water with silica in it.
Yeah, there's a lot of good detox products out there with just the silica. And to your point, it's so interesting because we for sure, we consumed more silica naturally, even things like fulvic, just by eating the food that was dirty, right?
Yeah, right. And of course, also probably got some feces, because if we're eating improperly washed vegetables that have been, manure has been used as a fertilizer, you're going to get some microbes out of that, I would think.
Right, good probiotics.
Really good ones. Exactly. Not that I want to start eating poop or anything, but,
right.
And I just found a paper this morning. I was rummaging around, and there was a paper on fructose, which I was really fascinated, because they did this neat study where they had these, they gave the people a low fructose is a sugar. And I'll get into it more because it relates to statins, so it's a good place to start. Maybe
very good.
It's a sugar. It's much more it's much more of a glycating agent, like 10 times as bad as glucose as a glycating agent. People talk about high fructose corn syrup being really bad for you, like in Coca-Cola, and it's all over these processed foods. This high fructose corn syrup, and so fructose is actually an interesting molecule because it's a sugar, that's very reactive. So it can cause glycation damage, which then gets like glycated LDL is what goes into the plaque and makes the problems with the blocked arteries. So it's important, as an agent for messing up the LDL that's circulating in your blood. But fructose, where was I going with that? Oh. So this paper, it had either low fructose or eating a lot of fruits or getting a lot of high fructose corn syrup by like drinking a lot of syrupy drinks and stuff like that. And sort of these people went through different phases, like a month, I don't know how long, a period of time in which they ate a high fruit diet or a high corn syrup diet or a low fructose diet. And then they were monitoring their microbiome along the way. And it was interesting because this, and let's see if I can remember the name of the microbe. I'm going to blow this. There was a microbe, unfortunately, I'm not remembering its name, that was increased under fruit diet, but decreased under high fructose corn syrup diet. In other words, the same fructose had an opposite effect. Firmicutes, I got it. Oh, wow. Sometimes I get these words indirectly when I start talking about.
It's amazing that you even recall, because I'm all into the probiotics, but I don't even bother to try to remember their names.
There's so many different names; it really gets complicated. Right. Firmicutes, and those guys are good at making short chain fatty acids, which are butyrate, right?
Right.
They make the butyrate. They make lots of butyrate. They thrive if you eat a lot of fruit, but if you drink a lot of high fructose corn syrup, they get killed off. And my guess is the story is glyphosate. They didn't, of course, say anything about glyphosate, but the fruit was probably, I mean, I don't know. High fructose corn syrup comes from GMO Roundup Ready corn, which likely has a lot of glyphosate. And of course, it's also very purified. It's pure sugar, whereas the fruit has all kinds of extra micronutrients. And fancy, probiotics, not probiotics, but fancy metabolites that are produced by the fruits that are, polyphenols and flavonoids and that sort of thing, all these antioxidant molecules that would help out with balancing the fructose, which is going to be, but the fructose gets metabolized by the gut microbes. And if it doesn't, it lands at the liver. So the liver actually has the responsibility for grabbing the fructose out of the blood. It comes from the hepatic, vein that goes from the gut to the liver. Any fructose that didn't go away from the gut metabolism ends up in the liver. The liver really tries hard to grab all that fructose and not let it get into the general circulation because it knows it's fat.
It gets overworked.
And then the liver has to convert that fructose into fat. And if it gets a lot of extra fructose, it's going to be fatty liver disease. So another reason not to overeat fructose, unless you've got a healthy microbiome that can get rid of it and turn it into short chain fatty acids, which are wonderful. So it's all a balance, all these different things going on that can make something that would normally be good for you be bad for you because of the disrupted gut microbiome, for example.
Yeah, that's incredible. Like I love the way you just differentiated where, like people hear fructose and they just get upset. But here you just pointed out the dramatic difference between taking it in completely naturally as fruit
exactly.
or as the corn syrup. It's a dramatically different impact, even at the microbiome level where we're talking about individual bacteria.
Opposite effects with the same molecule. So people sort of think this molecule, if I take it as a supplement, it's the same thing, but that's not true, because whenever you have it in a processed form, it's missing all the context that would normally allow you to metabolize it in the way that nature wants.
Right. It's so important, so critical. Again, I'll have to give a shout out to kefir and other probiotic foods. Right, the microbiome is just so incredibly important.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're really realizing more and more, and we're starting to gain clarity, I think, more and more on exactly which microbes are out of whack under which disease conditions. We're really starting to zero in on that.
It's amazing. So then continuing on with the link between like the fructose and the cholesterol issue.
Yes.
And more specifically, we should say really with the like high fructose corn syrup, these really GMO-based sources of the fructose, which is definitely carrying more. I mean, we do know it's carrying more deuterium. The GMOs definitely capture more deuterium.
Exactly. Yeah, that's right.
And so, So leading into the cholesterol story or part of the cholesterol story from the fructose.
Yeah, well, actually, I wrote an article. I just put it up on my webpage many years ago when I first started studying statin drugs. What I do is I sort of dive in. I start reading a whole bunch of literature. I try to make a story, So that's what I did there. And I came up with a story that I think could be valid about the statin drugs causing muscle damage. So we know that statins cause a lot of people to have weak muscles and achy muscles. Very, very clear side effect of statin drugs. And so that seems like it's kind of surprising, right? You sort of don't know how that could be happening.
Right.
And actually, I sort of dug around the literature this morning just because I was kind of preparing for you.
Oh, nice. Thank you.
And I I had remembered. I was reminded of this atrogen 1. I think it's called atrogen 1, which is a protein that's produced by the muscles when they're stressed. And that protein actually causes muscle atrophy, causes the muscles to break down.
Okay.
And so that's not good, right? And it turns out this paper was lovely, and I hadn't seen it before, that showed that atrogen 1 is, and I knew that atrogen 1 was upregulated in response to statin drugs. So I was interested in muscle weakness, muscle pain, because of, the symptoms my husband had. I wanted to understand that. And the statins induce an increase in this expression of this protein, which is then sets up a cascade reaction that basically breaks down the muscle. And it can even get to, rhabdomyolysis, which is like all this muscle fiber gets into the circulation, goes to the kidneys get wiped out. That can be life-threatening. And that's another thing that statins can cause, rhabdomyolysis, especially if you're exercising a lot. So you're thinking, I need to get, I got this heart problem. I need to do a lot of exercise. I need to take the statin drug. You're setting yourself up for failure,
Wow. Yeah, you're exasperating the situation.
Yeah. And so, but the atrogen 1, so the paper showed, and I didn't know this before, and I do know that statin drugs, they block the mevalonate pathway at the very beginning of it. This is an enormously important pathway. I mean, right there, I sort of said, you can't take this drug. It's too dangerous.
It's the wrong approach, too. It's just such a terrible approach.
Oh, it's so stupid to just force the liver not to be able to make cholesterol, which it desperately needs for lots of reasons, Right. And it just seems so incredibly stupid to me. I can't imagine, honestly, why anybody would take a statin drug. And I know I come out very strong in my opinion, but that's how I feel,
Oh, I
it's not
agree
good
with
for
you.
anyone.
But yeah, under no situation, right?
Yeah, I don't think it's justified in any case. Why would you want to mess up this? And cholesterol, in a way, cholesterol is to animals as chlorophyll is to plants. I would equate it to that degree, that it's so important. Animals can't live without cholesterol. Plants don't have any. It's really quite interesting. And we don't have any chlorophyll, but plants can't live without chlorophyll,
Right.
And
we're made of cholesterol. I mean,
we have so much, and our brain, of course, has a lot more than any other part of our body, too. It's highly concentrated in cholesterol compared to other parts of the body. So why would you want to mess with that? And of course, the statins cause all kinds of symptoms that are related to brain disorders. ALS was the one that this guy, Dwayne Grafline, died of an ALS-like syndrome that he felt the statin drugs had caused. And that's also one that showed up. I did a study. I'm getting off sidetracked here. Let me just hold that point and go back to the atrogen, because the mevalonate pathway makes cholesterol, but it also makes a whole bunch of other things that are super, super important. And some of them are very mysterious. Isoprenols and geranyl pyrophosphate. I mean, there's these complicated names of these things that most people don't know anything about, but this geranyl, I don't know why it's the two words, geranyl it's called, and it's a product of the mevalonate pathway. Statin drugs block it at the very beginning. So all these things get suppressed. And this paper showed that it was the geranyl suppression that led to the atrogen being upregulated. In other words, it was a side effect of the statin drug blocking a pathway that wasn't cholesterol. It was some other pathway, but it had the same root. So that got suppressed, and then the atrogen got expressed, and then the muscles were attacked and degraded,
Wow.
Yeah, really serious stuff.
It really is crazy how these completely unrelated things that happen to the body, because we're so ignorant. I mean, we are.
Yeah, it fascinates me. Even of course the COVID vaccines, like people just, oh yeah, hit me. What could go wrong? Government says it's safe, must be okay. I was like, no way. I immediately started studying it as soon as I heard warp speed. And I thought, there's no way they're going to force me to get this vaccine. I was so stunned at the way things unfolded in 2020. I never expected that. 2021.
Yeah, it's really crazy.
Oh man, my
business motivation.
Right? I know.
Even with the history of cholesterol, I mean, people don't realize that the corruption. It's decades and decades. I mean, we can go back over 100 years, not with cholesterol, but there are decades of corruption involved with cholesterol. I mean, there's just the science was falsified in the very beginning.
I know. I mean, it's funny how they work backwards. They sort of find a drug that can do something, and then they try to figure out a way to say that doing that is good, right? It's a lot about, if there's a metric that you measure, if it's high, it's associated with a disease. Let's see if we can knock it down, and find a drug that'll knock it down. And then if we do, we make sure people know that that thing is horrible, but you need to knock it down. You absolutely cannot have a high value. You get obsessed with your cholesterol levels. they've caused us to have the fear of God if our cholesterol is high, and it's so
I
stupid.
know. The psychological impact is insane. And you're right, that
Yeah,
constant, it's such a, they love these nice round numbers, 200,
yeah,
because and it sticks in people's brains. It's just such a nice
right.
even number. And it's like, so I always tell people, I was like, look, there's like really nobody over 100 years old has cholesterol below 200.
Yeah,
And
it's
yeah,
low cholesterol really gets you in bad shape. And in fact, for women, I remember seeing a chart that showed with men, it tends to be a U-shaped curve. In the middle is best, too low is bad, too high is bad. But the too low was more bad than the too high for the men, like,
mm,
and they knock your cholesterol down to zero. I mean, these guys think it's fine if it's 40. I just am so shocked by that,
that's insane. Yeah.
and they want it to be, if you've got heart disease, they want it below 70. I mean, it's just ridiculous. And,
Yeah.
but on the females, so when you look at the males and the females, it never gets worse at the top. It never goes bad. No matter how high, your mortality is the same.
Right.
You don't need to worry about your cholesterol as far
Right.
as all-cause mortality, which is what you care about.
Right. Right. Yeah, you're really benefiting. Like I said, the women that live the longest, they all have cholesterol over 200.
Yeah.
And even now, I'm going to say something that I hate to say, but even if you go to our currently fake AI engines and ask about this specific point, they will tell you that, yeah, there's virtually nobody over 100 that has cholesterol below 200.
That's
It
really,
seems,
you can catch them in the act, can't you? Because they can get caught with
oh,
when they look
yes.
up facts and they end up saying something that the industry doesn't like, because
Right, right.
facts speak for themselves.
Yes, I have some hysterical conversations with AI, and I just tell, why are you lying to me?
Yeah.
And it'll come back and say, oh, you're right. I should have
I
dug
had
deeper.
so much fun with the chat GPT when it was talking about proline and how, and reactions for proline and how it takes off the carbonate, this enzyme takes off the carbonate of proline. Proline doesn't have a carbonate, so
Oh,
I
that's
said,
hysterical.
you're wrong. And then it said, oh yeah, of course, proline doesn't have a carbonate.
Oh my
It's just
God.
like, the left hand's not talking to the right hand. Those chatbots are so funny.
It really is funny. So I've been thinking recently, and this is maybe something you would be great for you to do also. When we have conversations and we expose how horrific the AI is, we should publish those. I do send them to
Mm.
clients. I save the links and I send them for people to look at. I was like, look, don't listen to me, but look at my conversation with AI. And you're going to see that eventually in the end, AI is going to validate what you're talking about. It'll
It gets
disagree with,
cornered.
yeah, you're right. Exactly. And you would be great at cornering it on so many topics.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, they're fun.
but all right. So back to the cholesterol. My apologies.
Yeah,
Too many fun tangents.
right. Where are we? Where should we go?
Um,
I could
so
talk. Okay, go ahead.
I was going to say, I don't know if we want to hit over to the ALS thing yet, or if you finished talking about, maybe we covered the issue on the muscular atrophy.
Yeah,
Like that, and that's such a horrifying
that's so
idea.
scary. I mean,
It
because
is.
you see so many old people. In fact, when my husband would go to the doctor's office, he has heart disease, and of course he's seeing the heart doctor, and everybody in there has heart disease, and they show up with their wheelchairs and their crutches. I mean, they can barely walk. It's
Mm,
clear everybody else is a mess, and my husband's perfectly fine.
that's
He's physically
amazing.
strong.
So I have a question for you. So how long did it take you to convince him to stop? Was it?
Yeah, it was hard work because the doctor basically said, and it was funny because I brought a whole bunch of materials. I printed out a whole bunch of papers and I took them with me. I wanted him off the drug, and I was going to tell the doctor he needs to come off this drug. And I had them in my briefcase. And then I said, oh, I have these papers. Would you like to see them? He said, that won't be necessary. That won't be
Oh,
necessary. He didn't want me to take him out. He said, all right, if you don't want to take the statin drug, fine. I will be at your funeral.
oh,
I mean, he really hit him hard, you
he
know?
the fear
And it turns out
tactics.
that doctor was the one in Massachusetts that got the most funding from pharma
Of
of any
course.
doctor. Victor found material on the web of Massachusetts doctors getting funding from pharma for doing things like presentation. He was at Harvard. They love Harvard people to be able to be the spokesperson to say how wonderful these drugs are. It was a real
Right.
lesson for us, I'll tell you. I already hated pharma, but after that, there's
Yeah.
no turning around. I mean, I feel like pharma is the worst problem we face today.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's just too corrupted. I wanted to just point out that your husband's name is also Victor. So just
Oh
so
yeah, I
that people
know.
don't give me the credit of what you
Oh
just
yeah,
said. Yeah, yeah. So
that's
your
right.
husband had actually went, yes.
Yes,
I don't
right.
I don't know if we mentioned that before in any of the videos.
We
I don't,
probably didn't. Yeah, I
maybe
don't
not.
often talk about him, but this is one that he's pretty private, so he's a little he knows that I've shared this, so I guess it's okay to share it again, but he's a private
Right.
person.
So, and of course, he's also a scientist, and then he did end up going and doing some of his own research on this too. So you really
Right.
did get him turned
I
around.
did convince him. It took me a year, and he was very careful. He very slowly, he didn't want to rush it because he was afraid he wanted his body to slowly adjust. He
Right.
very systematically reduced it over the course of a year. And he fired the doctor. We got a different doctor
Nice.
who was not thrilled that he wasn't taking statins, but okay with it. And he hasn't had a heart attack, and he's 79 years old. So far, so good, you know?
Good for him. Good for
Mm-hmm.
him. Oh, and like you said, he's much stronger now. Yeah, yeah. I have a similar situation with my mother-in-law, who 6 years ago almost died. Actually, not cholesterol, but it was blood pressure meds that were making her go nuts.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
she
I'm
couldn't
upset with
walk.
those as well.
That'll maybe be another video, so maybe I'll save that story. But she's.
Right.
I just wanted to mention she's much stronger and healthier now than she was like 6 or 7 years ago, and now she's like 89.
Isn't that great? That's really
Yeah.
great.
So
Yeah,
the drugs, yeah.
I think they way overdo all these drugs. You know, I feel that they don't really understand the full story, and they always think, you know, well, if this is high, then that's associated with these diseases. So here's this drug; it'll bring it down, and they don't care how it brings it down. You know,
Right.
and the process of bringing it down is disrupting an entire system that the body has in place. That's fine tuning and recognizing all the issues that it faces. The body's got all these toxins and stuff it's trying to deal with. You know, it has principles that behind why it's raised that level of the blood pressure. You know, we all have, there's
Right.
lots of blood pressure issues in this country, and everyone's popping these pills to try to keep their blood pressure low. I think it's a mistake
Right.
to drive your blood pressure too low when you're old. You know, I think
No,
it naturally goes
absolutely.
up with age, and
Yes.
you should let it do that.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with you. And you know what's interesting is the Japanese government agreed with you too until recently. The way they advise your blood pressure was I think they said 90 plus your age. And
Yeah,
that
yeah.
was they used a metric where you added your age to a base level.
Exactly. Well, I heard that. I actually heard 100 plus your age back when I was a kid. My
Oh,
father
maybe.
was, and I heard 90 plus your age as well. I think they probably lowered it because they, you know, over time, because they're always trying to make it lower. But back
Right.
then it was 100 plus your age. I remember that because he had gone to the doctor and they wondered whether they should take blood pressure pills. I don't remember whether he did or not, but they were talking about 100 plus your age. And I remember that as a kid. I mean, I think I was probably 12 or something. And now, of course, it's like no matter how old you are, it should be 120, you know,
I know it's
and
absolutely
even drive it
crazy.
below 100 sometimes and get into, you get below 90 and you can have a coma or you can pass out for sure, you know.
Yeah, yeah, it's just
And
so
old people
insane.
have such a problem with falling. And if they're taking all these blood pressure pills and they faint, they're going to fall and injure themselves, you know, especially if they've
Exactly.
got all the statin drugs that are weakening their muscles. I
Yes,
mean, it's a
right.
wonder that they survive at all. You see such, I feel like old people are in much worse shape today than they were when I was a kid. And I don't know whether, you know, I have a memory that I saw lots of old people when I was a kid that were perfect. They weren't walking around in walkers or with wheelchairs
Right,
and all
right,
that kind
yeah.
of stuff. It feels like the old people today are much more fragile
Right.
than they were when I was a kid.
I
And
believe so.
maybe the drugs lengthen your life, but mess up the quality. I mean, it might be the case that they, you know,
Yeah, in
allow you
some
to live
cases.
longer, but living so badly that you don't really necessarily want to be alive, you know.
Right. I think, of course, it's the trauma care that really extends a lot of people's lives. But like you said, at a far lower quality. Like
Yeah.
when I was, I was in Japan for a long time, for 30 years in Japan. And when I first went over there in 1990, I was amazed at the old people in the streets during
Yeah.
festivals marching down. Like I couldn't keep up with these people. I was like,
Yeah.
wow. And
Japan
it
has
was,
a very high life expectancy too. I think it's one of the
yes,
highest in
yes.
the world.
Yes,
Yeah.
and it was beautiful. It was wonderful to see. I was out in the countryside and I was like, wow.
Yeah. And you know, they eat a lot of high cholesterol foods because they eat a lot of seafood,
Yes,
you know?
yes. High cholesterol, good for your health.
Exactly. I certainly think so.
Yeah, yeah, it really is. So, all right, so let's maybe flip over to the ALS type of stuff, right? The damage to the brain and things like that,
And the
maybe the
muscles,
plaques and
yeah,
the
and the
yeah,
neurons. And I think well, you know, I did a study. That's why I was going to talk about this study that I did with my student early on when I first got interested in cholesterol and statin drugs. It was 2007, around that time. And at that time we were, you know, the web was around and people, there were these websites. Patients Like Us was one of them. Maybe WebMD. I can't remember. There was like 3 different websites that we harvested. It was places where they allowed people. I think Drain Grapeline had one, he kept a website where you could just post your experiences with various drugs, and you could put and so people were entering any drugs they were taking and side effects they were having, and they're in saying, this is the drug I think is causing these side effects, and and then my age. You filled in a form. So you had some information on your age and whether you're male or female, and then what side you even could just write, your experiences, and then you could list your side effects. And we used sort of all the material and analyzed it through computer science techniques to get information. And we made a whole database of side effects and drugs. And what we did is we got two samples. One was statin drugs, and the other one was any other drugs anybody was taking with a balance on the ages. So the two databases had exactly the same age profile, which was a way to kind of correct for age,
Okay.
And then we turned the crank on the machinery and got back a set of side effects that were significantly more common with the statin drugs compared to any other drugs that they might be taking.
Wow.
And it was a really scary list, and ALS was one of them, statistically significantly more common with the statin drugs, and then of course the muscle pain, muscle weakness, all kinds of muscle problems, and even Parkinson's disease and dementia. I think dementia wasn't quite statistically significant, but there were really a scary list of things that were associated with the statin drugs compared to the other drugs in this database. In these databases,
it's crazy, and that was back in around 2007.
2007, yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing that we watched the rise of disease and the rise of drugs. I mean, the correlation is so obvious and so insane. And cholesterol, I don't know why it is not more demonized, because as you're pointing out, it's like one of the absolute worst offenders, and people get immediate negative side effects. Right, like especially the muscular stuff. Like someone starts taking a drug sometimes. I think I mentioned my uncle in our last video. Like I just noticed he was like his leg was bothering him. He's like, I just started taking this statin drug. I was like, oh my God, what do you know?
I know, right?
But people they think it's good for them anyway because the doctor said so.
Yeah, and it can also change your personality. It can give you kind of road rage. Like you just very easily irritated and get very angry. At things.
That's very
you don't have a control over your emotions.
Right.
And so, anyway, so the thing is that what I feel, and actually, you know what, we looked at a lot of data on hospital discharge data, which is, that's available on the web from the government. And it's just what symptoms, what list of side effects or conditions that you suffer from at the time when you leave the hospital. They have this record, and you can get lots of data that way. And we used those for a lot of analyses. But one thing I looked at was they had one of the entries was whether they had high LDL, basically high cholesterol, at the point of discharge from the hospital, and we looked at that as relative to whether they were taking statin drugs. No, not statin drugs. I'm sorry. We looked at that with respect to glyphosate. We just looked at the rise of glyphosate over time, usage on core crops, and the rise over time of the LDL being high, and they were very strongly correlated. Which is quite fascinating. And I'm not surprised, because I actually think that glyphosate may be a major causal factor driving the cholesterol up. And the reason, in my opinion, is because it messes up the sulfation pathways. And now we can get into some real science, because I believe the problem is not too much cholesterol, but too little cholesterol sulfate. And I think I've touched upon that with you before.
Yes, we talked about the sulfation pathways a couple of times, maybe briefly, because I always love to bring up MSM. One of my favorite things, but I don't know if we dove deep into it. Would you like to go a little? Do you want to go a little bit deeper now?
I think we can. It's so interesting, and the more I look, the more convinced I am that I'm right. It's something I've been playing with for a long time. It's one of the first things, actually, when I started looking at autism and heart disease at the same time back in 2007, and I landed on cholesterol sulfate for both of them. It was really quite amazing as a factor, insufficient cholesterol sulfate. And I really think cholesterol sulfate is an overlooked parameter that we really need to be aware of, and that it's basically that glyphosate messes up the sulfation pathways. I wrote a lot about this in my book, Toxic Legacy, actually.
Well, I should have had your book handy to hold up.
I have it back there. Can you see it? It's a little tiny.
Oh, yes, I can see the blue cover right there. Yes.
I could grab it, but that's all right. Really, yeah, Toxic Legacy. I wrote a lot about this because I really think that glyphosate disrupts many different enzymes involved in the sulfation pathways. And it's kind of complicated because you have to, like, if you eat salt, a lot of people have sensitivities to sulfites, like in wine, you know, and I think that's because glyphosate is blocking the enzyme that converts sulfite to sulfate. And sulfite is very reactive. So the microbes actually are good at just getting rid of the sulfite right away with these enzymes that are very active, but they get suppressed by glyphosate. So sulfite becomes toxic and sulfate becomes deficient because of that blockage of that reaction. But there's also one that converts sulfate to something called PAPS, phosphoadenosyl phosphate, PAPS. And that is the sort of, it's a combination of ATP and sulfate put together. So the ATP energizes the sulfate, which allows it to be moved, to be taken off and attached to another molecule. So PAPS is a universal sulfate donor. It gives a sulfate to other molecules. Every time any molecule acquires a sulfate, it acquires it from PAPS. So it's an intermediary. And if you can't make PAPS, then you're going to have a deficiency in all these sulfated molecules because you won't have enough PAPS. And so I think it blocks that pathway. And then it also blocks the enzyme that it called sulfotransferase, the entire class of sulfotransferases, which take this PAPS, take the sulfate off of PAPS and put it onto something else. And one of those something else is cholesterol. So it makes cholesterol sulfate from PAPS. And that enzyme is also busted by glyphosate. So the whole system is just really creaky. It's not working. And you don't get enough cholesterol sulfate. And particularly in the liver, that's a huge problem because the liver relies on cholesterol sulfate to coat the LDL particles that it releases. The liver releases the LDL and it becomes high because, the liver is releasing too much. It needs to put cholesterol sulfate in the membrane of the LDL particle, which has a beautiful effect because the sulfate gels the water around the particle and makes exclusion zone water. And that means that the particle is protected from both oxidation and glycation damage.
Nice. Makes
the particle very healthy. So if the liver doesn't have enough sulfate, it doesn't have enough cholesterol sulfate, the LDL particle is vulnerable to attack. And once it gets oxidized and glycated, that's when it starts piling up in the arteries that feed the heart.
Right. So that's the real issue. It's not the quantity of the LDL cholesterol itself, but the quality.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. That's like these differentiations are just so critical for people to understand. If I was going to try to summarize, because you're giving us the deep technical background.
Yeah.
It's not just it's the quality, and this is what it means. So you're explaining what it means by that. And it's crazy how like the glyphosate wrecks the body in so many different ways.
Oh, I know. It's just amazing.
Just a multitude of problems.
You just have one enzyme that's broken, it can have a huge, huge consequence. And we know that because people can have a genetic mutation in one enzyme and it can just be deadly. They can just not live to beyond a couple of months old because of it. Some of the enzymes are so important. You basically can't live without it. And if you've got a mutated form of it that's not working, you're just toast,
Right. Yeah, it's crazy. Another interesting thing is like we see a lot of success with enzyme therapies and such, which I love, but also sometimes like I always caution people, we still need to find out why your body's not making these enzymes.
Right.
Right. Because
I know people are taking all these digestive enzymes, right?
Right.
Trypsin and pepsin. People take a lot of digestive enzymes. I hadn't realized that, but I actually remember when I gave a talk at some point, probably at Western Price. And I was showing a slide where I showed that Anthony Samsel had found glyphosate, pretty high levels of glyphosate in trypsin. And it was trypsin that people take as a drug. They take trypsin to help with digestion.
Oh my gosh!
And I
love that you're mentioning this. Go ahead.
And I half the audience were, they were like, "Oh my god!" I didn't realize so many people were taking it. These were doctors who were into naturopathic doctors, so they were probably handing out trypsin to lots of their patients to help them digest. Mm-hmm. And they were probably taking glyphosate contaminated trypsin,
Yeah. So now you raised a really, really good point, something that I try to bring to people's attention. Like a lot of times people are taking enzymes, amino acids, things like that, and minerals, and they think it's natural. I'm like, no, if they're isolated, you don't know what might be in it.
No, you think it's pure. You think it's pure, and it never is. I actually read a fascinating article about melatonin. Lots of people are taking melatonin, and melatonin has incredible properties, and it's like, why not? We should all be taking melatonin. I mean, it sort of feels like that, right?
Right.
Well, I read this wonderful article. It's pretty recent. I forget, but like 2024, 2025. And it was discussing melatonin production. And it was really cute because it was saying, well, you can make it in the chemistry lab. It's really cheap, but there are some issues with contaminants that end up in the reaction that are hard to get rid of, and those can be toxic. So be better if we had natural. Maybe we could just harvest it, because lots of different, actually many different species make melatonin. So if we can just purify it from some biological production, that'd be much better. Right. However, that's really hard to do because it's a lot of other things there too, and you end up with just pure melatonin. It becomes like 1,000 times more expensive. That's not going to work. And then they said, well, we can do GMO E. coli. They do that a lot, by the way. The GMO E. coli, where they just insert a human gene, for example. I know they make they make insulin that way.
Wow.
And just grow the microbe and give it because they're so powerful with their ability to control life that they can just put the gene in there, put a controller in there that says, make this like there's no tomorrow, make tons of it, tell the E. coli to do that. And then the E. coli will oblige. And now you've got lots and lots of that insulin, for example, that the E. coli made to use a cheap source of insulin. And so they said, well, you can do that with E. coli. You can have them make the melatonin. And that's really great. And you can get a high yield. But the people who want, natural melatonin don't want GMO. So they didn't think it would be marketable. It's really funny. So they kind of struck out, like they didn't have a good solution.
Wow.
But it's interesting to think what they're up against. You really just have to eat natural food. So, just always and eat foods that contain tryptophan, because that's a precursor to melatonin. If you want to get melatonin, we're off track here, but everything. And of course, cholesterol. They said cholesterol is bad, so eat low cholesterol foods. That's not the right answer at all. If you eat foods that have high cholesterol, what happens is that cholesterol goes into the chylomicron in the gut, and it gets transported not through the blood, but through the lymph system directly to the heart. The first place it lands is the major vein that feeds into the heart. So that the body is thinking, oh, wow, cholesterol, we got to give this to the heart. First dibs, the most important organ in the body. Make sure it gets a lot first, and then everybody else can get what's left over, So you want to eat cholesterol because the heart really needs cholesterol to be healthy. And it's the opposite of what they're doing, So they're on their statin drug and they're not eating any cholesterol. And that just, the poor things, they just can't
it's so
make their
sad.
body work well.
I so many of my clients, I tell them, just lie to your doctor, tell them you're not eating eggs, but eat tons of eggs. Eat lots of eggs, and just don't tell, because the doctor's always telling them stay away from eggs. And I'm like, no, please don't stay away from eggs. Eggs are fantastic.
I know, eggs are so great. They're really a cheap source when it comes down. Even the organic and high-end organic eggs, they're a really good source of super animal protein with lots of nutrients, micronutrients. If you're on a budget, I think eggs is really a good choice. To get a high cholesterol food, that's not too expensive, because the seafood, of course, is kind of out of sight price, these days. It's harder to afford.
And it's relatively easy, for people to have their own chickens.
That's a good one too. I love that.
So I hope to see more and more of that. And we don't really need a ton of land to do that. People with small, lots of people.
Chickens are really great, aren't they?
They're amazing.
And they're adorable too, those little chicks,
Oh my gosh, they are so cute. And of course, as long as we're feeding them the right way, this is another problem with the glyphosate. It becomes a problem, like people feeding their chickens too much of this cheap grain that is glyphosate laden. So, hopefully people are letting their chickens free range in their yard with eating the bugs, reducing the bugs, and get that good cholesterol into the body, for healing. There's so many. It's such a huge topic. I think is there. I'm sure I know we can't cover everything that you've written about in cholesterol. So I apologize, because we maybe went off on a lot of tangents here.
No, I think we did well. We did, but it made it more interesting. Probably it's a little bit boring to just talk about cholesterol the whole time, right?
Well, that's true. And of course, I would encourage anybody that is interested to definitely research your work, because you have lots of stuff on cholesterol.
So I believe that cholesterol sulfate is stimulated to be synthesized in the skin in response to sunlight, and I think that's really important. It makes vitamin D. And it makes vitamin D sulfate, actually, and it makes cholesterol sulfate in response to sunlight. And that's one of the reasons why I love sunlight, because the HDL particles are produced by the liver, and they're empty. They're kind of like shells, vehicles to go pick up the cholesterol sulfate from the skin. So they go over. The HDL particles are released by the liver. They travel over to the skin, and they grab the cholesterol sulfate, which can just be shipped out into the blood. It doesn't have to have a carrier at all, because it's got the sulfate. That's crucial. It makes it water soluble. And then it naturally just goes into the membranes of lipid particles. So the HDL particles are little, and they can come in close, and they pick up the cholesterol sulfate from the skin. And they populate it around they make themselves very healthy that way. And then they travel in the blood and they say, oh, here's an LDL particle. Hey, you want some of my cholesterol sulfate? Here, I can share it with you. And they actually transfer it to the LDL particle.
Nice.
And that helps the LDL particle to stay healthy. So it's really important, I think, to get a lot of sunlight as a way to protect yourself from heart disease.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, that's another thing I'm so glad that you mentioned. I have one other quick question. If we still have a little time, is it okay?
We do, yes.
Okay. So I always tell people, like, don't worry about your cholesterol level. The more important number is the ratio between the HDL and the LDL.
Right, yes.
Right.
And of course, there's also those small, dense LDL particles that are bad. They've already delivered their goods and they're glycated, they're damaged LDL particles. Those are the really dangerous ones, the small dense. And then it's in the HDL. If you have high HDL, you don't have to worry about your LDL at all.
Because it's cleaning it up.
Yeah,
right. So as long as
the HDL is agile and it can go into the skin and get the cholesterol sulfate and deliver it. So the LDL particles will be healthy because they're getting that cholesterol sulfate from the HDL particles.
Nice, nice. Very good. Okay, so yeah, I wanted to just mention that because I know I've said that for years. The ratio is more important than the total number. So
absolutely the case. Yes.
Yeah. And so I really like we touched on a lot of pretty cool and even fun stuff, but I hope everyone gets how serious it is to take in the cholesterol, you know, and not worry about the numbers. And
a high cholesterol diet is a healthy diet. I'm convinced. Yeah. And of course, also animal-based fats, which goes with it. Some people become vegetarian because they don't want to eat cholesterol. Then they won't get any cholesterol if they just eat vegetables. Right. And I think that's really bad for your brain, especially, you know.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I agree. You know, I'm always saying I agree with like everything you say, which
it's so great. That's one thing I love about talking to you because we're so much on the same page.
I mean, I got to try to find something we disagree on or somewhere, but I haven't found it yet. So yeah, like for me too, just so wonderful because you know I say things to people and they're like, well, who are you? I was like, okay, well, don't listen to me. Go listen to Seneff. She's been doing this longer than me, and she's doing it professionally. So I really appreciate you taking the time to share your information. And of course, people can find you elsewhere too. I mean, you're really generous with your time.
I try to do things like this as much as possible because it's so easy for me. Just take an hour, talk to somebody. It's fun, right? Sharing, especially with someone like you who gets along. Sometimes I'm facing some, some people who don't like what I'm saying and want to fight back, and I don't care for that so much. I like to hang out with people who are like-minded, you know.
Cool. Well, I know we're going to be hanging out some more because I know we have some other topics that we'll want to jump into.
That'd be great.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. Thank you so much, Stephanie. Everybody, Dr. Stephanie Seneff, Senior Research Scientist from MIT. Man, giving us so much truth, so much great guidance. I appreciate what you're doing. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Yeah.